In this video, I will give you every player that you need to succeed for the Saturday Wildcard Round playoff games on FanDuel in under 5 minutes. My name's Quick Pick Nick, and having simulated 8,790,600 unique combinations of quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, and more, here are your likes and lotteries for tomorrow, January 9th, 2021. If you like this kind of fast-paced calculated content, subscribe and stay tuned for more lineups throughout the postseason, including a DraftKings lineup for Sunday's slate of playoff games tomorrow. And if you're looking for DraftKings advice for this slate, let me know in the comments, and I'll give you my self-proclaimed professional opinion. To start off this lineup with our first lock, I'll actually start with one of our running backs because the run game in this slate in particular was pretty easy to figure out, as our first lock is Jonathan Taylor. The reason Taylor needs to be in this lineup is because the rush defenses of most teams playing tomorrow are some of the best in the league, and in fact 4 of the 6 teams in this slate rank in the top 5 with respect to rushing yards allowed per game. Those teams include the Buccaneers at the top of the rankings, followed by the Colts in second, then the Rams and the Seahawks trailing in 5th in rush yards allowed per game, meaning that you should probably avoid any running back going against any of those 4 teams, leaving us with running back options from only the Colts and the Buccaneers, facing off against Buffalo's 17th ranked defense in rush yards allowed per game and Washington's 13th ranked defense respectively, with Jonathan Taylor coming fresh off a 253 rush yard performance, averaging 123.5 yards per game over the past 6 weeks, and going into the weakest rush defense in this slate. Taylor is going to be your best choice at the position. For the second running back, the obvious choice would be Ronald Jones, as the second weakest rush defense is the Washington football team, so naturally you would want to take the lead back with that matchup. However, you could double dip from Indianapolis and take Nyheim Hines, as he does see playtime alongside Taylor, acting as a short-range dual-threat passing option for Phillip Rivers. And that short-range game will have similar effectiveness against Buffalo's relatively poor rush defense. So at the end of the day, my model suggests that you should absolutely lock in Taylor and then lock in at least one of either Jones or Hines as your second running back. There was some variation as to which one my model ended up with, but in a lot of top-ranked simulations, both actually made the cut, with one filling in the flex position, since their low FanDuel costs hold up compared to even wide receivers and tight ends. So in this lineup, we'll be taking all 3 of Taylor, Jones, and Hines. Just know that the flex position has a little bit of wiggle room if you'd rather another receiver. For the fourth and final lock, we'll actually be taking the Colts defense, and the reason I'm locking in a defense is because they are very cheap, ranking as 4th on the price list of the 6 options, yet are one of the strongest choices, averaging above 9 fantasy points per game on the season and managing 9 or more fantasy points in 4 of their past 5 contests. For the lotteries, we'll start with the quarterback, as my model chose Josh Allen. At $9,000 on FanDuel, Allen is very expensive, costing $1,000 more than the next quarterback of Tom Brady, which is the main reason he's a lottery. If Jared Goff manages to suit up, he is also a strong option for $2,000 less than Allen, as Goff will face Seattle's second worst defense with respect to passing yards allowed per game. So if Goff plays, you might want to consider looking his way if you really need the extra budget, but Allen remains the top option and the safest choice for this slate, as he's only fallen below 18 fantasy points 4 times in 2020, and has scored more than 30 points twice over the past 3 weeks. Indy's pass defense isn't as strong as their rush defense either, as they've allowed the 13th most passing yards per game this season. One of the main benefactor of the Colts' weak secondary is our first lottery receiver, Cole Beasley. Beasley was nearly a lock, but with his injury designation, the return of John Brown, and the upcoming of Gabriel Davis, there were too many outside factors to affect his outlook. If we see a similar Beasley to before his injury though, we should be able to expect huge numbers, having been targeted 10 or more times in 4 of his past 6 contests, and averaging over 13 fantasy points per game during that span. The other 2 lottery receivers are also dependent on their injuries and statuses approaching game time, but assuming both of these guys are good to go, they should produce with huge numbers given their underrated costs, as my model selected Mike Evans and Cooper Kupp. If Evans is performing at full capacity, he's even a better choice compared to Godwin, as just the week before his injury, Evans managed over 35 fantasy points, and Evans has scored more than Godwin in all 5 of their latest games before last week. On the other hand, Kupp will face that weak Seattle secondary I mentioned earlier, and at just $6,500 on FanDuel, we could see huge numbers for a very low cost, scoring above 10 fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games. For the lottery tight end, my model chose Rob Gronkowski, as he fits in perfectly with the budget constraints and has seemed to get back on the same page as Brady down in Tampa Bay. But also keep an eye out for Logan Thomas if you can afford him, as my model chose Thomas in other simulations in which he was affordable. But I'd say just pick whichever one fits your budget once you finish. If you end up needing to make adjustments due to injury reports, like upgrading Evans to Godwin or Beasley to Diggs, I would recommend finding that cash from either downgrading the quarterback or the wide receiver positions. The running backs here are the best you're going to get, and both the tight end and defense are already big value plays while staying at low cost. That's what my model was able to come up with for the first half of the wildcard round of the 2020 NFL playoffs on FanDuel. This has been Quick Pick Nick, the intersection for sports, data analysis, and speed. Thanks for watching.